It was supposed to be a night of elegance and recognition, the Whitman's annual legacy gala. Crystal chandeliers twinkled overhead, violins hummed in the background, and waiters in tuxedos floated through the crowd like whispers. The family had spared no expense. The venue sparkled, the air buzzed with curated praise, and everyone played their role. Mine, apparently, was comic relief. I had just returned to my seat after troubleshooting the lighting cues for the tribute montage. A montage I had edited, color-corrected, and scored when no one else bothered when the spotlight hit the stage. Diane, my mother-in-law, stood there in sequined confidence, holding her champagne flute like a wand. "I'd like to take a moment to thank the woman who kept the lights on, literally," she said, pausing for effect. "Let's hear it for our very own tech support, coffee courier, and miracle worker, Rachel." Laughter rippled through the ballroom. It was polite, punch-down laughter, the kind that floats up from manicured mouths and tight jaws, the kind that masks its cruelty under a veil of sophistication. Ethan, my husband, standing next to her, leaned into the mic with a smirk. "She even kept the Wi-Fi from dying on us, truly heroic." More laughter. My name was a punchline, a throwaway line in their script. I felt my cheeks go warm. I smiled barely, a twitch, a survival reflex. My fingers gripped the stem of my wine glass tighter. Across the room, I saw Caleb, my 9-year-old son, shift uncomfortably in his chair. His eyes found mine, silently asking what the joke was. I didn't know how to explain that I was it. They didn't know I had handled the sponsor outreach, built the Gala website from scratch, processed the vendor invoices, and written the script Ethan was reading off the teleprompter. They didn't know because they never asked. Because real power isn't seen, not when it's a woman like me holding it up from beneath. I kept still. Inside I was screaming. And somewhere in that scream, a new voice began to form. One that wasn't asking to be included. One that wasn't waiting for permission. They thought I was the help. Tonight they were going to learn who really held this family together. And when I finally spoke, it wouldn't be for applause. It would be to end the performance. I wasn't born into wealth. My parents were teachers in Ohio, humble, kind-hearted, and painfully practical. Our dinners were homemade, our vacations road-tripped, and our dreams realistic. I was the girl who made her own prom dress from discount fabric and applied for scholarships like it was a sport. So when I met Ethan at a corporate leadership conference, I didn't expect sparks to fly. But they did. He was golden, handsome, eloquent heir to the Whitman business dynasty. And somehow he noticed me. I was 27 then, already working in finance, moonlighting as a digital designer for nonprofits. Ethan found my duality fascinating. At first, he used to say I was the most capable woman he'd ever met. He liked how I didn't fawn over his last name or his connections. He said I grounded him. That changed quickly after the wedding. The Whitmans weren't just a family, they were a brand. Their Thanksgiving dinners had hashtags. Their holiday cards were mailed on thick linen stock with foil-embossed lettering. Diane, the matriarch, ran the show. If the family legacy was a castle, she was the stone it sat on. She didn't dislike me outright. She just made it clear I was functional, a useful add-on. "You're so competent, Rachel," she said once, as I organized the seating chart for a foundation luncheon she was too swamped to manage. "We don't have to worry about you needing attention." Backhanded praise became the norm. Ethan slowly stopped noticing, stopped defending. Maybe it was easier for him. Maybe it was strategic. After all, in the Whitman world, drama was gauche. Composure was currency. I told myself to adapt, to be the bigger person. I took on the role of fixer, tech glitches, budget woes, vendor delays. Rachel would handle it. Even Caleb's birthday parties became elaborate productions I was expected to manage. But this gala, this one was different. It wasn't just about charity or status. It was the 50th anniversary of the Whitman Foundation, and they wanted it flawless. And without Diane saying it directly, it was clear who they were leaning on. 3 months ago, Diane forwarded me a rough concept document with a vague, "see what you can do." I built the entire structure from that half-page mess. I designed the brand materials, structured the event program, secured last-minute sponsorships when a major donor pulled out, and even handled the catering pivot after a supplier went bankrupt. I made troubleshooting manuals, tech contingency plans, even custom-printed name cards that matched the napkin folds Diane chose. I coached the junior volunteers and ghost-wrote Ethan's speech. I did it all in silence, and I told no one, because I wanted to believe it would finally be different, that this time they'd see me. Then Diane stood on that stage and turned me into a punchline. That was the moment something snapped, not just in me, but between me and the identity I had stitched together for survival. The mask of the patient daughter-in-law, the fixer, the silent partner. I walked out of the ballroom without anyone noticing, out into the chilly air behind the venue. My dress brushed against the dew-dampened grass. The sound of distant laughter gnawed at my nerves. The faint tinkling of cutlery against glass reminded me that while they toasted, I was swallowing the bitter taste of erasure. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Solitude answers, but instead I found Caleb. He sat on the stone bench near the garden fountain, legs swinging. His jacket was too big for his frame, and his hair was still mussed from earlier. He looked up when he saw me unsure. "Are you mad?" he asked. "No," I said, "not at you. But you left. You always stay." I sat beside him. Sometimes staying quiet feels worse. He tilted his head. "Then why did you—" And there it was. A question a child asked, but one that pierced like a blade. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But inside me, the answer roared, because I thought I had to. We sat there for a while, the two of us. Then Caleb said, "They laughed, but I didn't get it." "I know. I think it was a mean joke." I nodded. It was. He looked up at me with a seriousness I didn't expect. "You should tell them what you did for the gala." I smiled, but it was tight. Would they care? Caleb paused, then shrugged. "I would." That's when I realized the only audience that mattered had already been watching, and I wasn't going to let him grow up thinking his mother was a woman who let herself be laughed at. I kissed his forehead and said, "Let's go back inside." Not to fade in again, but to prepare. Because if I was going to speak, it wouldn't be petty. It wouldn't be vindictive. It would be undeniable. If you've ever been in a room full of people who clap for what you do, but ignore who you are, you'll understand. And if this moment resonates with you, maybe hit that like button or share this story with someone who needs it. We don't need to shout to be heard. But sometimes we do need to stand. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while Ethan snored gently beside me, utterly unbothered. The laughter from the gala still echoed in my ears, elegant, condescending, careless. I had tried for years to fit in by being useful, but I finally understood they didn't see me as essential. They saw me as efficient background noise. That was about to change. Around 3 a.m., I got out of bed and made tea. The glow of my laptop filled the kitchen. I opened the shared folders, the email chains, the financial tracking sheets, everything I had done over the last 3 months. It was staggering. Grant negotiations, RSVP analytics, crisis management notes, event scripts. I organized them into a single, unassailable slideshow. No commentary, just facts. Then I printed out hard copies of the sponsor contracts and correspondence just in case anyone tried to accidentally delete something later. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be clinical, public, and precise. I went further. I created a summary sheet with color-coded timelines, tasks, categorized by urgency and impact, and a breakdown of hours spent by department, except 86% of the entries came back to me. I drafted a one-pager of proposed recommendations for future events, not because I planned to stay involved, but because I wanted them to feel the absence of my foresight. The final push came the next morning. Caleb, still in his pajamas, shuffled into the kitchen and pointed at my laptop. "Are you making that for the people at the gala?" I nodded. "Good," he said simply, "because you did everything." It struck me then this wasn't about vengeance alone. This was about rewriting the narrative not just for me, but for the little boy watching me decide who I really was. I didn't want a scene, I wanted a shift. So I waited for the right moment, and it came 2 days later at the post-gala family debrief. The Whitmans always held a follow-up brunch where they casually dissected the event's successes and failures while sipping mimosas and pretending the family business didn't revolve around image maintenance. We gathered in Diane's glass-walled sitting room, the sun filtering through her curated orchid display. Diane in her signature camel cashmere wrap beamed. Another success. Well done, everyone, especially Ethan for that touching closing speech. Ethan smiled modestly, like he hadn't read every word straight off the teleprompter I programmed. "And let's not forget our tireless volunteers," Diane added with mock sweetness, her eyes glancing over me as if I were the help refilling coffee. I cleared my throat. "I actually put something together," I said, sliding a flash drive across the coffee table. Diane blinked. "You did?" "Yes, just a recap of what went into the gala from planning to execution." Ethan looked wary. "Rach, is that really necessary?" "I think it is." I stood and walked over to the mounted screen in the room, plugged in the drive, brought up the deck. The first slide was simple: Whitman Foundation Gala Who Did What. What followed was a timeline of the event preparation dates tasks and my initials beside 90% of them. Fundraising calls, crisis emails, vendor outreach. Slide by slide, I narrated nothing. I let the documentation speak. The room went quiet. The click of each slide sounded like a gavel. Then I scrolled to the recovery plan from the catering fiasco. Next to it, I showed email chains of me managing the refund negotiations, securing the backup chef, and adjusting the seating chart accordingly. Real-time stamps, forwarded confirmations. I flipped to the sponsorship page, the one where my outreach brought in $78,000 from 2 firms that had never before attended a Whitman event. These cold calls happened on nights I stayed up past midnight after working my actual job, I added quietly. Diane's smile faltered. I didn't realize you handled all of this. No one did, I said calmly. That's the point. Ethan swallowed hard. You could have said something sooner. I did, 100 times. You weren't listening. I turned off the screen. I don't need applause, but I also won't accept being erased. Then I laid the hard copies on the coffee table. Beside them, I placed one final page, a resignation letter from future unpaid Whitman event planning. And I walked out. Behind me, I heard only silence. It was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. The fallout didn't happen immediately. That's the thing with this kind of revenge. It's not about drama. It's about disruption. And disruptions ripple. After I left the sitting room, I didn't linger. I took Caleb to the park where he laughed at ducks and climbed the jungle gym like nothing had happened. He giggled as I pushed him on the swing, the sun dappling through the trees above us. For a moment, I almost forgot the tension waiting back home. But my phone stayed quiet. No texts, no calls. Silence had returned, only this time it wasn't mine. By that evening, Ethan approached me like someone stepping into a crime scene. Can we talk, he asked. I nodded, but didn't offer to sit. I didn't know you felt that way, he said. Because you didn't ask. He scratched his head. You blindsided everyone. I told the truth. Ethan exhaled. You embarrassed my mother. She embarrassed me. Publicly. Repeatedly. And if that truth makes her uncomfortable, maybe it's time she sits with that discomfort. He didn't argue further. He just left the room. But the tone had shifted. I could feel it in the quiet spaces between us. For the first time, it wasn't just avoidance, it was realization. The next morning, I received an email from one of the foundation board members, someone I'd only met in passing. It read, Rachel, I had no idea. If you ever consider joining the board officially, I'd be honored to nominate you. I stared at that email for a long time. Not because I wanted the position, but because it confirmed something I'd suspected. People had seen the work. They just didn't know who to credit. Diane, to her credit, didn't confront me directly. But I noticed the subtle changes. Her tone softened. She no longer handed me tasks with the expectation I'd say yes. When she spoke at a follow-up fundraiser the next week, she acknowledged the tireless work of those who operate behind the scenes, then hesitated before saying, including my daughter-in-law, Rachel. It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in her mask. I didn't need more. The biggest shift came from Caleb. He started asking questions about coding event planning design. He watched me work and started mimicking my phrases. One evening, while organizing my files, I found a sticky note on my monitor. You're the boss, Mama. That small piece of paper meant more than any award. A few days later, Ethan came home and hovered at the kitchen entrance. You've been getting a lot of calls lately, he said. I've been busy, I replied. Are you starting something? I already did, I replied, not unkindly. He nodded slowly, taking it in. You're really good at this, you know. I looked up surprised. Thanks. He didn't push. He left it there. And maybe that was growth. Or maybe it was just retreat. I wasn't looking for his validation anymore. 1 week after the gala, I posted the event's project outline to my professional portfolio site. I didn't mention the drama. I didn't need to. Within days, I received inquiries from other nonprofits and event planners. Are you available for consulting? Yes, I was. And then during a dinner party with family friends, someone asked Ethan how the gala had gone. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Rachel organized the whole thing, Caleb piped up proud as ever. The room chuckled. But it wasn't a mocking laugh. It was a surprised, impressed hum. A few guests asked questions. One even asked for my business card. Diane changed the subject. I didn't. Because for once I wasn't shrinking into the background. I was rising. If you've ever reclaimed your voice after years of being talked over, drop a comment below. I want to know your story. And if this moment resonates with you, give it a like. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. And maybe hit subscribe. The world's full of noise, but silence. Silence can be revolutionary. 3 weeks after the gala, the Whitman Foundation's quarterly board meeting was scheduled to be hosted surprisingly at our home. Diane claimed it would be a lovely change of pace, but I knew better. It was an attempt to reclaim control, to reassert the family's polished image, as if my act of rebellion had simply been a fluke, a temporary lapse of etiquette. I didn't protest. I had other plans. The day of the meeting, I set the house flawlessly. Fresh-cut sunflowers in ceramic vases, artisan snacks arranged just so, the slide deck ready on screen. Diane arrived first, flanked by two longtime allies on the board. She barely glanced at me as she walked in. The room filled, greetings buzzed, and then came the surprise. Just as Diane cleared her throat to begin, one of the newer board members, a woman named Claudia Sharp and respected, spoke up. Before we start, I'd like to propose a formal vote to expand the executive board's advisory panel, she said. I think it's time we include operational voices in our leadership. People who know what it takes to execute our vision. She turned to me. I nominate Rachel Whitman. Gasps, silence, then murmurs. Diane's eyes twitched. Claudia, that's highly unorthodox. And long overdue, Claudia interrupted, smiling. Rachel has been doing the work. We all saw her presentation. It was the most thorough report this board has ever received. Votes were cast, the motion passed. Just like that, I was no longer the helper. I was the voice in the room. The plot twist: Diane had unknowingly hosted the moment that diluted her own power. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded in acknowledgement, thanked the room, and sat quietly, letting the weight of the shift settle over everyone. Later, as the meeting disbanded, Diane lingered. I hope you're proud of yourself, she said. I am, I answered. And you should be too. You raised a son who married a woman capable of reshaping the room with facts alone. Her lips parted, but no words came. I left her there, standing in my hallway amidst the sunflowers. She didn't compliment in the house she didn't think I could manage, watching a family narrative quietly, permanently shift. There's a unique silence that comes not from shame, but from being heard so clearly that no one dares speak against it. If you've ever been underestimated, used, or laughed at in a room you helped build, this story was for you. Not all victories are loud. Some arrive on the heels of quiet certainty and calculated truth. I'd love to hear your story. When was the moment you reclaimed your voice? Drop it in the comments. And if this journey resonated, like, share, and subscribe for more stories about quiet power and the women who wield it. Until next time, don't shrink. Stand. Because sometimes the revolution begins with a whisper. 3 weeks after the gala, the Whitman Foundation's quarterly board meeting was scheduled to be hosted surprisingly at our home. Diane claimed it would be a lovely change of pace, but I knew better. It was an attempt to reclaim control, to reassert the family's polished image, as if my act of rebellion had simply been a fluke, a temporary lapse of etiquette. I didn't protest. I had other plans. The day of the meeting, I set the house flawlessly, fresh-cut sunflowers in ceramic vases, artisan snacks arranged just so, the slide deck ready on screen. I even made sure the house smelled like citrus and cedar, professional, sharp, unshakable. Diane arrived first, flanked by two longtime allies on the board. She barely glanced at me as she walked in. The room filled, greetings buzzed, and then came the surprise. Just as Diane cleared her throat to begin, one of the newer board members, a woman named Claudia Sharp and respected, spoke up. Before we start, I'd like to propose a formal vote to expand the executive board's advisory panel, she said. I think it's time we include operational voices in our leadership. People who know what it takes to execute our vision. She turned to me. I nominate Rachel Whitman. Gasps, silence, then murmurs. Some nods, one audible, it's about time. Diane's eyes twitched. Claudia, that's highly unorthodox. And long overdue, Claudia interrupted, smiling. Rachel has been doing the work. We all saw her presentation. It was the most thorough report this board has ever received. Votes were cast. The motion passed. Just like that, I was no longer the helper. I was the voice in the room. The plot twist: Diane had unknowingly hosted the moment that diluted her own power. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded in acknowledgement, thanked the room, and sat quietly, letting the weight of the shift settle over everyone. Later, as the meeting disbanded and people congratulated me with firm handshakes and real smiles, Diane lingered. I hope you're proud of yourself, she said. I am, I answered. And you should be too. You raised a son who married a woman capable of reshaping the room with facts alone. Her lips parted, but no words came. For once, Diane was the one left speechless. I left her there, standing in my hallway amidst the sunflowers she didn't compliment in the house she didn't think I could manage, watching a family narrative quietly permanently shift. Later that evening, Caleb watched as I carefully filed away board documents into a leather binder. "So what do you do now?" he asked. Now I smiled. "Now I show them what happens when the help stops helping and starts leading." He grinned. "Can I tell my teacher my mom's a boss?" "You absolutely can." There's a unique silence that comes not from shame, but from being heard so clearly that no one dares speak against it. If you've ever been underestimated, used, or laughed at in a room you helped build, this story was for you. Not all victories are loud. Some arrive on the heels of quiet certainty and calculated truth. I'd love to hear your story. When was the moment you reclaimed your voice? Drop it in the comments. And if this journey resonated, share and subscribe for more stories about quiet power and the women who wield it. Until next time, don't shrink. Stand. Because sometimes the revolution begins with a whisper.